On this episode, I'm going to be showing some tips and tricks on how to install baseboards over obstacles and interference, and especially on this existing baseboard that wasn't cut properly. Okay, so stay tuned. Welcome to Fix This House. If you're new to the channel, please consider pressing the subscribe and notification bell so you could always be in tune on DIYs, how-to videos, and product reviews that I do within this channel. So we have a dilemma here. We have an obstacle that is going across or through our wall that we want to install baseboards over, but we also have this existing baseboard that is cut incorrectly, and we're going to go fix that. So take your stud finder, find those studs. Now for instructional purposes only, I'm using some masking tape to mark where the studs are located. Now I'm going to be using a speed square to mark this baseboard so I can cut it and trim it down, or you can use a steel carpenter square just like what I'm using here, which actually is a lot easier than using those speed square. Okay, so I'm just going to mark out a straight line of where I'm going to make that cut on this existing baseboard. Now I'm going to be using my Works oscillating tool. This is a perfect tool for these type of cuts where you can't really get any other cutters to cut this, and it will make the job a lot easier. I'm also using my vacuum as a cut because it will be generating a lot of dust. Carefully just cut through this baseboard. Now this baseboard wasn't supposed to be cut this way. It should have been cut with a 46-degree angle, so the next baseboard coming right through it would 90 perfectly right through it. So I want you to make this cut. Be very careful. Take your time. As you can see, I actually kind of nicked off part of my drywall. You can see on the very top, so just be very careful when you're doing this. Now you have two options. You can use your tape measure. Make sure when you're using a tape measure, make sure you get the closest measurement. I'm using up to the 1/16 of an inch measurement. Again, you don't have to use a tape measure. You can take your pieces of scrap baseboard, little pieces, lay it up against the wall and mark it from there. I drew this this map so that I can show you all the measurements. It's good practice to lay and draw all your pieces so that you don't get confused. And here I'm just using my tiny scrap pieces to figure out which pieces actually go with my measurements. Again, I like to use the 46-degree angle on my miter saw, so that will give us a nice tight outside corner. Okay, so like after you make that cut, you can see my first cut is about 1 1/8 long. I'm going to measure from the inside corner of my baseboard, mark it, and then flip it over to your miter saw. Cut it to the 0 degrees, which is a perfectly straight cut, just like what you see there. Now double check, make sure you measure it. It measures up to 1 1/8. Now with my stud finder, I'm locating the next stud over because I don't have a long enough piece of a baseboard. So this one is where I'm going to connect the next adjoining piece. Okay, so there I'm going to measure out how much I need, mark out, which is around 21 inches. I'm gonna place my miter saw onto the 45.5, make that cut, and there you have it. I'm gonna measure again on the inside corner of my baseboard, and again I'm gonna mark the piece that I need. And again, it's good practice, tip and trick for you guys to draw out where that angle is so you don't confuse yourself and you don't end up wasting baseboards. Now we're gonna make that cut, and this should measure out to the piece that we need. Again, I made this a 45-degree cut so that the next piece that I join it will actually have much structural strength. Again, you can go from 15 to 20 degrees, but it's totally up to you. So as you can see on this drawing, I need 3/4, so that's really small of a measurement. It's 3/4 of an inch. So what we're gonna use is my speed square to make that line from that degree angle. And then I'm going to measure 3/4 of an inch. And again, the length of this 2x4 going through the wall is 3 5/8 inch. Now from there, you don't want to make it exactly 3 5/8. You want to give it at least 1/4 of extra, just so you can have a buffer. I give it a few inches for it to move around and not exactly a tight fit. Now I'm going to mark out the layers that I'm going to cut so I don't confuse myself. So that's good practice as well. You can either use your oscillating tool. This is actually method number 1. You can use your oscillating tool to cut this cutout, but you might have a little bit of rough cutting on the edges right there. Be very careful, have a steady hand when you're cutting this, okay? And then with your oscillating tool, just trim out those edges, inside edges, which makes it really clean and smooth, just like what you see here. The other option is you can either use your miter saw, and I prefer this method better because it makes a cleaner cut and it's a lot easier. And then for the remaining line right there, use your oscillating tool. Again, make sure you practice with steady hands and be very careful because this thing will jump around if you don't control it correctly. And again, clean up the inside of those corners. Okay, so it should look like this, nice and clean. place it over just like that to dry fit it, and it should fit nicely over the interference. Again, always dry fit your materials before actually gluing it so you know exactly where it's gonna fit. Now it's time for gluing. So this is the glue that I like to use. I like to use this 2P10 and this activator. Again, all the tools and materials I'll use in this video, I'll leave it in the description down below to make it easy for you to find. You don't have to go crazy on this glue. Just glue around the perimeter and you should be fine. And make sure you use a drop cloth or anything so when you're spraying that activator, because you don't want this stuff on your floor. It will ruin it. Take your time when you're piecing this together. Again, right when it makes contact, you have 3 seconds before this glue hardens and it pretty much is a permanent bond. And if you try to take it apart, it will rip apart your MDF or your baseboard. So be very careful. Take your time. Make it look nice. Again, there's a little gap right there, but it's fine. I'll show you how to close that off later. And again, I didn't show this on the video, but I actually glued these two pieces right here where this arrow is. I glued it with the glue and the activator. Now the nail gun the brad nailer that I'm using today is by Works. I love using this. It's very light and it's fast and it's fairly quiet rather than using an air brad nailer. And then you have it. Now once it's brad nail, you're gonna have this gap right there. Now this is the part we're going to be using the wood filler. This is the wood filler by Elmer's. Now for my little mini trowel trick, I like to use this box knife blade. Again, that's one of the tricks of the trade I like to use. Use your wood filler, squeeze it onto those nail holes and those and that gap right there. And then what I like to use with my box knife blade, this is actually one of the tricks I like to show you because it's a lot easier to use than using a trowel, and it's a lot faster and more convenient to spread that wood filler in. Now use your fingers. Don't be scared to get this on your fingers. Put it over those little gaps and those mini tiny cracks right there. It's fine because we're going to be sanding this in a little bit. This is actually, you don't have to make it look pretty. Just don't overdo it, just so you don't take so much time sanding it. Now take and drop off the area that you're going to be sanding. And then we're going to be using I'm actually using a 600 grit sandpaper for this for finisher. And then I'm just going to take my time. Again, it's all about finesse right now. Feel and sand at the same time so that you know where all the bumps and the highs and lows, and you can sand that area. And make sure you clean around this area real well. Now I'm using this extra piece of baseboard. This is about 1 inch height, just so that I can cover those rest of those gaps and to make it have a nice flow onto my baseboard. I like to use this DAP stretch caulking. I like to use this on every type of my baseboard. Again, I'll leave this in the description down below. And make sure that you use your fingers to get that excess, and then dab it on a wet rag trick. That's what I like to do. Clean it off and dab it on a wet rag so you don't get this all over your fingers. Now the rest, just caulk around those gaps that you see, including this little tiny gap right here where those two baseboards meet. Just like there. You're probably wondering why there's a 2x4 running there. It's just the style that we went through. Don't judge me. And again, just use your brush. I like to use the brush first to get the paint on, just like what you see here. And I like to finish it off with a paint roller, because I don't like having those brush strokes. I like to have that nice kind of sprayed look using this roller. So it's totally up to you. This is just my method. And make sure that you apply this paint really well. Do double coats so that you don't see that wood filler gap where you actually fill that wood in to make it invisible. After that, take off the masking tape, and you might have some paint residue. I like to use a toothpick and kind of just clean off and scrape off those excess underneath that baseboard. That's if you're being nitpicky like me. Again, you don't have to do this, but I like to make it look nice and clean. Again, attention to detail. And there you have it. This is what it looked like before, friends, before we actually applied, and this is what it looks like after. Not bad, right? It looks pretty good. So let me know what you think. So once again, friends, if you found value and you found this video helpful for you, please hit that big thumbs up, press that subscribe button and notification bell so you can always be in tune on DIYs, how-to videos and product reviews, and simple DIYs. You can do this like this. So stay tuned for more baseboard videos coming up. So thank you very much. I'll see you on the next one.